So to fully understand the impact of our reading for this morning, I want to quickly draw your attention to the first 10 verses of the chapters. And these words describe a world that is conflicted, a world filled with hostility, a world between death and life, filled with sin. And it is indeed, if you read it, a rather distressing picture that the author paints. Listen to some of what he has to say. You were dead through your trespasses and sins. You lived with the passions of the flesh, following the desires of the flesh and senses. You were the children of wrath. You did not know God. So the author begins this chapter with that kind of a message because he wants to show this contrast from where they were estranged to where they are now reconciled. Estranged, now reconciled. Now, theologically, what is being addressed is God's action in Christ to counter the consequence of sin and death. The action that transforms sin is the action of reconciliation. And that presupposes sin. That presupposes hostility between one and another, between those who belong and those who don't, those residents and those aliens, those insiders and outsiders. So here it is, according to this letter to the Ephesians, that good news is present, that reconciliation is no longer a vision that will come later on, a longing that was always hoped for. Reconciliation is present now for us who are in Christ. Christ reconciles us, thus making peace with God. And so for all those who are estranged from God, they have now been brought back into the covenant. And that's how the formula theologically presents itself. And I think we ought to affirm as followers of Christ that we simply are reconciled to God. All the dividing walls, all the hostilities has been broken down, and no longer are we strangers to God, alien to God, but members of God's household. And that's good news to share with the world that likes to be disconnected. Listen to what the late Marcus Borg, a progressive theologian, wrote. He says, God wills our reconciliation, our return from exile. God wills our enlightenment, our seeing. God wills our forgiveness, our release from sin and guilt. God wills that we see ourselves as God's beloved. God wills our resurrection, our passage from death to life. God wills for us food and drink and to satisfy our hunger and thirst. In other words, God reconciles us. So that's good news. That is really, really good news, not only just theologically, but personally as well. Think about that. This is not an abstract theological concept. It is a personal, and becomes personal when we think about the relevancy it has in our life. Who are we estranged from? Because it seems to me that often many of us have estranged relationships. We're alienated. And that is really very painful for many of us. And if it's not actually in your life right now, I bet that you know someone who has been estranged or who's alienated from someone. There is lots of it going on within our families and our friends. And there are various reasons that estrangement occurs. Think about that: a divorce, in-law problems, family dynamics, addiction, bad lifestyle choices, unacceptable marriage, someone leaving a religion or joining a different one, a family business that fails causes estrangement. conflict over inheritance, sexual orientation of a child, a sibling taking on the burden of caring for their aging parent while the other one stays in California but knows what's best. See, I'm guessing that if you don't have some kind of estrangement in your family dynamics, you know where it exists among your friends. It's the reality in our lives. So that's why reconciliation matters. It's relevant for us because there is estrangement in our lives. The etymology of the word estranged is to treat like a stranger or to treat as indifferent. And it's defined as a turning away in feeling or affection, make unfriendly or hostile, remove or keep at a distance, or to divert from original intent. So I'm going to suggest that being estranged or alienated from someone is a very unsettling place to be, and it probably is not the healthiest place for us to live from. So I just want you to think about it and bring into consciousness someone you are distant with or alienated from, and then imagine the ability to make room for a kind of action that lies outside what is normal. Something that lies outside the boundaries of normal, ordinary behavior, and I'll suggest that's reconciliation. Because it is reconciliation that can re-establish those alienated relationships. It is to bring together that which has been broken. It's a process where you talk to each other, where you exchange stories, where you share your hurt, where you listen for regret. It is a process to begin to reestablish what was broken, which is trust. So it's a complicated process, but reconciliation is possible. So a while back, Karen, I went to a fundraiser for one of the community organizations. Karen, we was spared from the obligation because both of us didn't really need to be there. So we flipped the coin and I was not the winner. It was an upscale event, but typical fundraiser, the kind of food that you get there. And after kind of mingling and greeting the usual predicted crowd at those fundraisers, I made my way over to the silent auction table. Wine, baskets, family photo session, exotic travels in the winter, private dining experience. It was all there, ready for a bid. I perused for a bit until I discovered item 604. I thought. I pondered. Would that be too weird? Then I put a bid down on it. I put a reasonable bid because it's a fundraiser, and it's an agency that we support. So I didn't want to lowball it. I wanted to be supportive with my bid. I waited and watched as the silent auction countdown began, and by golly, my bid was the highest for item 604. I was a winner, I thought. So item 604, you ready for this? Dancing lessons. No, I really bid on dancing lessons, but not only that, Latin ballroom dancing lessons. So I wanted to learn the salsa and tango with Karen. So I arrived home. Karen, knowing very well my patterns at fundraisers, and in her familiar and kind way asked, "What did you bid on this time?" I said, This is actually true. I said item 604. She said, "That's nice, honey. Hope you had a good time," and turned her attention back to the book. I threw the certificate on the pile of papers and sat down to quiet the ringing noise in my head of all those people. So the next morning arrived. I made my way to the coffee pot, and I sat in my morning quiet chair. And surprisingly, Karen joined me that morning. "Dancing lesson," she said. "You bid on dancing lesson." I said, "Not just dancing lessons, Latin ballroom dancing lessons." She gave me that look like, "Are you out of your mind?" I said, "Yeah, I want to learn to dance the tango and to learn the salsa. Don't you think it would be fun?" The tilt of her head made me realize how exceptionally odd it was for me to bid on Latin ballroom dancing. Then she said, "Remember, it takes two to tango." And sweetly reminded me that I can't dance, and no lessons will correct that reality. So we had a very good chuckle that morning, and on my desk is a certificate for item number 604, if you would like to come see it, unused, that is. Two to tango. So here's the first point I want you to hear. It takes two to reconcile. One person can forgive, can erase the hurt, but it always takes two to reconcile. Lewis Smead's right. It takes one person to forgive. It takes two people to be reunited. Because as an individual, I get to choose, and that I have the power to forgive. And that doesn't mean that I'm willing to forgive anything or everything, because sometimes the wrongs are so hurtful and painful, it can take one's entire life's journey to get to forgiveness. But the possibility of forgiveness is mine. I own that. My capacity to forgive does not depend on the one who is mean to me's permission. I get to erase it. But reconciliation has multi-person. It takes both people to reconcile, to choose to do what they need to do to restore the relationship. One person can be completely willing, but the other person is not willing. Reconciliation won't occur. The relationship will simply not be reestablished. This means that I can forgive someone for damaging our friendship, but perhaps I don't desire to resume the friendship, or I might forgive and be ready to reconcile, but the other person no longer wants to be in a friendship with me, or the other person who can forgive me, but I don't want to reconcile. It takes two to do the tango. It takes two to reconcile. Now, as you think about that person in your life you become alienated from, the question you begin with is, do you want to reconcile? Do you want to reestablish that relationship and start to build the trust again? And I encourage you to sit with that question, and if the answer is yes, or even maybe, or maybe I need some more time, just take a little step forward. Because reconciliation always begins with a step toward. Doesn't mean the reconciliation will occur, but that step toward expresses some of your desire. And so that leads to this to the other point I want to offer. Forgiveness is internal. It's an internal discipline. Reconciliation is an outward process and expression. It's that actual first step toward. Think about that, because reconciliation is not private, because it always includes the other. I can practice forgiveness without you knowing that I've forgiven you, mean person who said that to me this morning. I can be terribly hurt at my sibling for what she said during a critical family crisis, but I get to choose forgiveness without your need of knowing my struggle. So reconciliation is the visible act. It is the dance that begins when you reestablish the trust. And it takes both to be on that journey. Philip Yancey wrote that Christian faith is basically about love and being loved and reconciliation. These things are so important, they're foundational, as they can transform individuals and families. Reconciliation is transforming. It is the concrete actions from both sides or all sides. It is maturity and it's acceptance and it's sensitivity and it's judgment. It is compassion and honesty and accountability. And it takes time to reestablish and rebuild boundaries of trust. So I want to encourage you to see the possibility of reconciliation and how relevant it is in your life in those relationships that have become estranged for whatever the reasons. And I want you to see the transformative power reconciliation has in hurting relationships. And I invite you to consider making a step. Because without that little step, nothing can change. And yet with that little step, all the dividing walls, all the hostility, all that separation separates us can begin to be broken down. And relationships can begin to be reestablished, and trust can be once again expected friendship. So, my third point is, it's a better way to live, and it's worth our try. Thanks be to God. Amen.